It's about that trust fund your grandfather left behind. You know, Katie's been absolutely devastated lately after that breakup with Marcus. She can barely get out of bed, and she keeps saying the only thing that will help her heal is a long trip to Europe to clear her head. Paris, Rome, Barcelona, she has the whole itinerary mapped out. So, we've decided that we'll be using that money for her. Isn't that wonderful? It's what family does. My hand, which had been holding a turkey and Swiss sandwich over my desk at the accounting firm, froze mid-bite. My mother had just spoken those words over the phone with such casual certainty, without the slightest hint of guilt or hesitation, announcing that she was going to use the $25,000 trust fund my late grandfather had specifically left for me. I slowly set the sandwich down on the desk mat, wiped my fingers on a napkin, and, while forcing my voice to stay flat and unemotional, asked, "What do you mean by that, exactly?" On the other end of the line, my mother let out a deeply exasperated sigh, the kind she always used when she thought I was being deliberately difficult. "Oh, honestly, Madison, didn't I already explain everything clearly? We're going to use Grandpa's inheritance, the $25,000, for Katie. To be perfectly blunt with you, even if you had that money sitting in your account, you'd just hoard it away like a squirrel with nuts. You'd never actually spend it on anything fun or meaningful. Looking at your dull little life, just work, home, sleep, repeat, it honestly worries me as your mother. You have no joy." Haha. Her shrill, shallow laughter echoed through the phone, grating against my ear. "Oh, and there's just one little problem," she continued, her voice suddenly sharpening with impatience. "We're at the bank right now, standing in the lobby. But the clerk here keeps insisting that by some ridiculous regulation, they need verbal confirmation from the beneficiary herself. Honestly, such a hassle for a simple family matter. Could you just hurry up and say, 'I give my permission over the phone'? That's all it takes. Your father's standing right next to me, and he's getting irritated with all this red tape." They were stuck in the bank lobby, facing their final obstacle. "Katie's trip starts the day after tomorrow. We've already put the flights and the hotel on the credit card, so this really needs to go smoothly." Her words left me stunned into silence for a long moment. They had already counted money I hadn't even received yet as their own. They had gone ahead and booked everything. Flights, hotels, probably even some guided tours, planning to cover the entire credit card bill with my inheritance. The sheer audacity, the breathtaking lack of planning and basic decency, was so unbelievable that my anger evaporated almost instantly, replaced by a dry, almost hysterical urge to laugh out loud. Without my explicit consent, they couldn't get a single cent out of that trust. The fact that they had been forced to call me as their last resort made one thing painfully, beautifully clear: all the power was in my hands. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my now cold coffee. Strangely, my mind was perfectly calm, almost serene. Tightening my grip on the receiver, I asked in a quiet, measured voice, "Why does it have to be my money? If it's really for Katie's trip, why don't you take her using your own money? You have savings, don't you?" There was a brief pause on the line. My mother seemed momentarily at a loss for words, caught off guard by my question. But she quickly recovered, launching into a shrill, hysterical tirade. "How can you say that when you know our financial situation perfectly well? Besides, this is for your own good too. Helping your younger sister when she's clinically depressed is the obvious duty of an older sister, isn't it? Family helps family. That's the rule." I listened in complete silence as the selfish justifications poured out of the receiver like a flood. "Katie is your own flesh and blood. It's for the sake of this family. You don't even have any real use for that money anyway. You're just going to let it sit there until you're 80. None of it reached me anymore." Her words bounced off an emotional wall I had been building for years. When she finally ran out of steam, I spoke in a calm but utterly decisive voice. "All right, I understand everything you've said. Everything will be resolved by tomorrow morning." "Really?" My mother's voice brightened instantly, all the previous frustration melting away. "Oh, thank goodness. I knew deep down you'd see reason. I knew you wouldn't let your sister down. I'll let the bank know right away. You're a good girl, Madison." The call ended abruptly, the line going dead. My parents must have relaxed immediately, fully convinced that I had given in to their demands, just like I always had in the past. But they didn't know yet. They had no idea that when I said resolved, I meant something entirely different from what they were expecting. In truth, this situation hadn't surprised me at all. I had seen it coming for years. It all traced back to 3 years earlier, on a rainy Tuesday when a single, heavy envelope arrived in my mailbox. The sender was Attorney Smith from the law firm that had handled all of my grandfather's assets during his lifetime. Seeing the firm's logo embossed on the thick, expensive paper made my heart skip a beat. It had been years since my grandfather passed away from a sudden heart attack. Why no? A vague sense of dread washed over me. This couldn't possibly be good news. Frowning, I carefully opened the envelope with a silver paper knife. Inside was a warning, so shocking it far exceeded anything I could have imagined about my parents. Dear Madison, recently, your parents visited our office to inquire about the possibility of an early withdrawal from the trust fund your grandfather established for you. While we informed them firmly that this is not permitted under any circumstances under the terms of the trust, their level of interest and persistence was concerning enough that we felt it prudent to notify you directly. My hand trembled slightly as I held the letter. Why? I murmured without realizing it. I could feel the blood drain from my face. It was the sensation of something solid I had always believed in, my family's basic decency, collapsing beneath my feet. I immediately called the attorney. I needed to confirm the facts, the details, as soon as humanly possible. After a few rings, a familiar voice came through the receiver, calm, measured, and grave, just as I remembered. Hello, this is Attorney Smith. Sir, this is Madison Gale. I just received your letter. Could you please explain what this means? Is it true that my parents came to your office asking about my trust fund? I could hear it myself. My voice was shaking as I fired off questions one after another. On the other end of the line, I heard Attorney Smith draw a quiet, careful breath. Please listen carefully and try to stay calm, Madison. Your grandfather was deeply concerned about your parents' sense of financial responsibility and their spending habits. That is precisely why he imposed extremely strict conditions on this trust fund. It was not designed to be convenient. It was designed to protect you from the very situation we're now seeing. The words "to protect you" struck straight into my chest like an arrow. Protect me? What do you mean by that? And these strict conditions, what exactly are they? I only remember being told there was some money for when I turned 35. After a brief pause, Attorney Smith replied in a gentle, instructive tone. Madison, forgive me for asking, but have you ever read the entire trust agreement with your own eyes? Every single page? No. To be honest, I only heard a summary from my mother years ago. I never actually read the full document. I trusted them. I see. Your grandfather's true intentions and the fortress he built to protect you are all written there in black and white. I strongly recommend that you review it carefully yourself. The legal language may be dense and difficult, but it contains matters that are very important for your future and your peace of mind. His words made me painfully aware of my own carelessness and blind trust. Understood. I should still have it stored at home in my safe. I'll check it immediately tonight. If there's anything you don't understand after reading it, please don't hesitate to contact me at any time, day or night. Your grandfather specifically asked that I support you whenever you might need help or guidance. Those warm, professional words eased the tension in my chest just a little. Thank you, sir. That's very reassuring to hear. After ending the call, I went to the small study at the back of my house and took out a bundle of old, yellowing documents from a locked drawer. For the first time in my life, I carefully read through the entire trust agreement from start to finish. Something I had never examined seriously before. As I turned each page, my fingers moved cautiously as though I were unraveling a piece of hidden history. There, laid out in unmistakable, legally binding terms, were my grandfather's deep love for me and his profound distrust of my parents' financial ethics. One clause stood out above all others. The funds of this trust shall not, in principle, be withdrawn until the beneficiary, Madison Gale, reaches the age of 35. However, an exception may be made only if the beneficiary herself requires the funds for a clearly defined life purpose, such as starting a legitimate business, purchasing a primary residence, or pursuing higher education, and submits a written request bearing her own handwritten signature. Any withdrawal request made by a third party other than the beneficiary shall be deemed null and void, regardless of the stated reason or emotional plea. In the event of any attempted fraud, including the forgery of the beneficiary's signature, the bank, acting as trustee, shall have the right to immediately pursue legal action to the fullest extent of the law. The severity of the wording felt like an impregnable castle wall made of iron and stone. I remember my chest tightening as I realized just how carefully my grandfather had thought through every possible scenario to protect me, even after his death. The moment I read that clause, I knew it with absolute certainty. No matter how underhanded or manipulative my parents might become, there was no possible way for them to take my grandfather's inheritance without my explicit, written, and signed consent. That was why I'd been able to stay so calm during my mother's call earlier that day. Still, being calm didn't mean I felt nothing. 3 years ago, the attorney had already told them clearly that an early withdrawal was impossible, and yet they hadn't given up. The moment they hit the final wall at the bank, they shamelessly called me directly and demanded that I give permission over the phone like a child. Rather than pure anger, what filled me was stunned disbelief and a bottomless sense of disappointment that people bound to me by blood could be this brazenly shameless. About an hour after my mother hung up, my smartphone lit up again with an unfamiliar number. The caller was a representative from the bank's trust department. His voice was polite but unmistakably tense. "May I speak with Ms. Madison Gale? This is John Harris from the trust department. Do you have a moment to talk?" "Yes, go ahead," I replied calmly, leaning back in my office chair. "Earlier today, we received a withdrawal request for the trust fund submitted by your mother, along with an application bearing what appears to be your signature. However, given the large amount, $25,000, bank policy requires that the beneficiary appear in person for final identity verification and a verbal confirmation. We apologize for the inconvenience, but would it be possible for you to visit our branch at your earliest convenience?" I answered quietly, "That won't be necessary." I could sense a flicker of confusion on the other end. "Pardon me? I'm not sure I understand." I continued slowly but clearly, enunciating every word. "To begin with, I have never consented to any such withdrawal. Not verbally, not in writing. And of course, I have never signed that application you're looking at." The air on the line instantly went cold. I could hear him inhale sharply. The purely administrative, routine tone vanished from his voice, replaced by the taut professionalism of someone who had just grasped the gravity of a potentially criminal situation. "I see. To confirm then, are you stating that the signature on the submitted document is not yours? That it was placed there without your knowledge or permission?" "That's correct. This is a fraudulent withdrawal request, pure and simple." "Understood. Thank you for clearly confirming your intent and your position. We will formally reject this application immediately. Additionally, since this involves the serious matter of potential signature forgery and attempted fraud, we will report it to our legal department and take appropriate action at once. This is now out of my hands." "Please do," I said simply. "Do whatever you need to do." And with that, I ended the call. The document bearing my forged signature that my parents had submitted had at that very moment transformed into irrefutable evidence of their own crime. They had handed the bank a confession without even realizing it. A few days later, I woke up a little earlier than usual and took my time brewing a careful cup of dark roast coffee in my French press. Around that same time, my parents and Katie were probably rushing through their final preparations for the trip to Europe. Katie might have been standing in front of her full-length mirror, posing in a brand new sundress. My mother was likely saying cheerfully, "The bank paperwork is all taken care of now. All that's left is to pack our bags and enjoy ourselves." While my father nodded in satisfaction, checking their passports over and over. In their minds, the $25,000 had already slipped neatly into their pockets, shining as a future filled with luxury, fine dining, and happy memories. But the moment when that sweet illusion would be shattered into pieces was already much closer than they thought. The day before, I had asked Attorney Smith and the bank representative to send my parents formal notifications by certified mail, requiring their signatures upon delivery. One envelope was thick and bore the bank's official logo. Its heading read, in bold red letters, "Important notice regarding the final decision on the trust fund withdrawal request." Inside, in cold, impersonal, legal language, it stated that the request had been formally denied due to my explicit refusal as the beneficiary. The withdrawal request has been rejected permanently. No changes have been made to the trust fund. Funds remain under the sole control of Madison Gale. And then there was the second envelope. Heavier still, stamped with the embossed crest of Smith Law Offices, this one would be the decisive blow. Inside were enlarged, high-resolution photocopies of the forged Madison Gale signature from the application, placed alongside a copy of my genuine signature from my driver's license, accompanied by a preliminary summary of a handwriting analysis from a forensic expert. And the enclosed letter stated the following, in no uncertain terms. As outlined above, the act of forging the beneficiary's signature and attempting unauthorized access to trust assets may constitute the crimes of document forgery, attempted fraud, and identity theft under state law. Should we not receive a written response from you within 7 days of receipt of this notice, we will have no choice but to consider all legal remedies available, including the filing of a formal criminal complaint with the district attorney's office. As legal representatives of the beneficiary, Ms. Madison Gale. These two letters proved, beyond any doubt, that the funding source for their poorly planned dream had been completely and permanently cut off. First, they would be forced to face the financial reality. Katie's dream trip to Europe would vanish the day before departure, along with the non-refundable cancellation fees for flights, hotels, and tours they had put on their credit card. And my parents would be confronted, in stark black and white print, with the terrifying possibility that they were not just parents who had overstepped, but potential criminals who had tried to steal their own daughter's inheritance. Just as I expected, the storm hit shortly after 10 a.m. My once quiet smartphone suddenly began vibrating violently, as if it were screaming for attention. The name on the screen was Katie. I simply looked at it for a moment and set the phone down on the kitchen table without answering. Seconds later, messages started popping up one after another in rapid succession. "Hey Madison, what is going on? We got these weird letters from the bank and some law firm. Did you do something? Did you call them? Pick up the phone right now. Mom is literally panicking. She's crying. This isn't funny. You need to explain yourself." As soon as Katie's frantic messages stopped, my mother started calling. The phone rang 10 times before switching to voicemail. 1 minute later, she called again. I ignored that too. After several more persistent, desperate calls, the phone finally went quiet for a moment, only to light up again with an incoming call from my father. Watching them take turns trying to reach me like a relay race was almost absurd in its desperation. After a while, a notification appeared indicating I had a new voicemail. Out of dull curiosity, I played it. The first thing I heard was my mother's hysterical, shrill scream. "Madison, what on earth did you do to us? What is this letter from the bank? The request has been rejected. What does that even mean? Didn't you give permission? And what's this about a lawyer threatening to sue us? Are you seriously trying to treat us like common criminals? Explain yourself right this second." Then came my father's voice, low and shaking with barely contained rage. "Madison, it's your father. What kind of sick joke is this? A lawyer? Criminal charges? Don't push this too far. You call this so-called lawyer immediately and make him withdraw this ridiculous notice. Do you hear me? This is an order from your father. If you're really going to betray your own family like this," the threat cut off mid-sentence. He had probably worked himself into such a fury that he couldn't even finish the thought. I quietly deleted the voicemail without saving it. Their voices had been soaked with panic, anger, and just a trace of genuine fear. The fortress my grandfather had left behind was working perfectly. For the next several days, I ignored every single attempt they made to contact me. Then, on the day before the 7-day deadline set by the law firm, I received a calm call from Attorney Smith. "Madison, your parents contacted me today," he said in a measured tone. They were extremely frightened by the possibility of criminal charges, which was the intended effect. "Unfortunately, I never once heard an actual apology directed at you. Not once. They kept repeating things like, 'If Madison will just forgive us, we'd like to resolve this quietly as a family, and this is just a misunderstanding between family members, nothing criminal.'" The moment I heard that report, the last remaining thread of hope inside me snapped. Quietly, completely, and permanently. Maybe I had been holding on to a faint, foolish hope that they might say even a single word acknowledging their wrongdoing. But until the very end, they thought only of their own desires and self-preservation. I took a deep, steadying breath and then spoke in a voice hardened by final resolve. "Sir, I understand. This is enough. I won't press criminal charges against them, but in exchange, I want them out of my house entirely. I could take them to court, but for what? Punishing them matters far less to me now than removing them from my life completely and quickly. That is what truly matters for my future." On the other end of the line, Attorney Smith fell silent, clearly taken aback. "Excuse me, Madison. Did you just say your house? What exactly do you mean by that? Are your parents currently living in a home that you own?" There was genuine surprise in his voice, along with the need to confirm what he had just heard. "Yes, they are," I said. "That's exactly what I mean." That question opened the floodgates. I began speaking about things I had never told anyone before. Things even the attorney hadn't known. My parents started living in that house 4 years ago. My father lost his home after a failed investment in a restaurant that went under. He came to me in tears at my apartment, begging, "Madison, please help us. We have nowhere else to go." I paused, lowering my eyes as painful memories from that time surfaced. On the other end, Attorney Smith said nothing. He simply waited patiently. "I agreed on the condition that it would be strictly temporary," I continued, "just until they got back on their feet and found their own place." But they never kept that promise. They stayed there rent-free, year after year, as if it were their natural right. I've never once heard a single word of genuine gratitude. Anger and old sadness bled into my voice. Before I knew it, my own house had become their house entirely. They redecorated, moved in extra furniture, acted like I was the guest. It became so unbearable that a year ago, I ended up renting a small separate apartment and moving out myself just to have peace. This time, Attorney Smith spoke, his voice heavier now, fully grasping the seriousness of the situation. "So, you were effectively forced out of your own legally owned home?" "Yes," I replied, nodding weakly even though he couldn't see me. "I have a stable position at the accounting firm, and I'm financially secure. That made me convenient for them to exploit. Now, even Katie lives there as if it's completely natural and deserved." I continued, the words spilling out. "I've told them over and over to leave. My father always says, 'Have you forgotten how we raised you? You owe us.' My mother says, 'We're going through a hard time, too. Have some compassion.' Nothing but excuses and guilt trips. They never listen to my actual needs. I'm at my absolute limit." The last words came out almost like a sob I had been holding in for years. After I finished speaking, Attorney Smith was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried deep sympathy and firm, professional resolve. "I understand everything you've told me, Madison. You've endured more than enough. More than anyone should have to. I will support your decision with everything I have at my disposal. Based on your wishes, I will draft a formal eviction notice from our law office. With my signature, James Smith, attached, its legal weight will be undeniable. They won't be able to dismiss it as mere stubbornness from a daughter." "Thank you, sir," I said, my voice trembling with relief and gratitude. "How long should we give them?" "Under state law, Regardless of the circumstances, a minimum notice period of 30 days is required for a formal eviction from a primary residence. Unfortunately, shortening that legally is extremely difficult without cause like property damage. At the attorney's calm explanation, I bit my lip for a moment. I wanted them out immediately, but the law wouldn't allow that. Then 30 days. Please. The shortest period legally possible. I answered immediately, my voice filled with resolve. Understood. I'll prepare the notice setting the final deadline for voluntary vacating at 30 days from today, followed by a forced eviction if necessary. That evening, a certified mail, a second official letter under Attorney Smith's name, was sent to the house my parents were still living in. My house. That night in my small, peaceful apartment, I spread out the trust fund documents my grandfather had left behind. Papers I had ignored for years. The words "starting a business" glimmered before me like a bright light pointing toward a new future. That night was hell for them, but for me, it was the beginning of freedom.